Welcome everyone to our last career speaker series of the term. My name is Claude, if you haven't been here before, and I am the outreach coordinator and the advisor for the computer information technology and cloud computing programs here at Delgado Community College, and I am the host for this event. Today, I am joined by Lexi Cummins of RollMaster Software. Lexi works as a full stack software developer. She started as a French language content writer and editor, and then took the Frontend Web Development course over at General Assembly in 2014. And in 2018, completed the Full Stack Web Development Professional Certification Program at University of Pennsylvania, where she gained all the skills and confidence to transition into a tech career, which she works now. She's been working as a professional developer on an all remote team since 2019, so before COVID even. Um, and so we are super excited to hear more about what that was like and, how she got there and what she's doing right now. But before I hand it over to Lexi, I just want to go over some ground rules and to let everyone know what exactly the Career Speaker Series is. So for those who are new, for those who haven't been here before, for those who have just forgotten, the Career Speaker Series is a monthly series of guest presentations from industry professionals in the IT and related fields, talk about, what it is that they're doing, how they even got there, and how you might be able to as well. We put these events on just to demystify all the tech careers and opportunities in the world for all of our students, faculty, staff at Delgado, as well as members of the community, since technology is all around us. So we want you guys to know how you can, tap into that stuff all around us. The format of these events is pretty standard. We have our presentation by our lovely guest speaker, followed by a Q&A. So I ask that you please mute yourselves until that time. And you can also feel free to drop in your questions in the chat and I will get them to our speaker, whether you just want to, write it down before you forget it, or you're too shy to put your mic on, or, you have like 20 cats yelling in the background, can't put your mic on, you can always drop it in the chat. Last thing from me, if you are having fun today, we encourage anyone watching to shout out about it on social media with the hashtag #TheOtherCSS, and be sure to add us at Delgado IT Pro on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and I will drop that in the chat. But that is everything from me. I am now going to turn it over to Lexi, who will be giving us a presentation about her and how she got in her career as a full stack web developer. So, Lexi, it is you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Lexi. Thank you so much, Claude, for inviting me to speak here. And thank you to everyone for showing up and listening to what I have to say. I had an atypical journey into the tech world, which I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. And I just wrapped up my second year as a full stack developer, as Claude mentioned. So I'm celebrating that, and it feels surreal to have been working as a developer professionally for so long. But I'm still so excited about my decision to transfer into this career field. So a little bit about me. I grew up with absolutely no tech in my house, like the lowest of the low tech. We didn't have a computer in my house until I was like high school, late middle school. And it was, not like me getting my own laptop. It was definitely like a computer for everyone to use in the middle of the house. So for a long time, my technological prowess pretty much extended to Frogger and whatever they were teaching us in computer class at school, which was typing and word processors and all that good stuff. And much to my parents' chagrin, a few times over LimeWire. So I didn't know anything. I didn't grow up with anybody who was super enthused about tech. So I didn't get into it until much later in life. So all that to say, did not come naturally, was not a natural trajectory for me. So once when I was in school, I learned that I had an affinity for learning languages, foreign languages. I started learning French in 5th grade, and I loved it. And I continued through high school, and I was naturally good at it, and I really enjoyed it. And I just kind of let that carry me into university. And I ended up majoring in French language and literature, which I loved. So after that, the natural trajectory was, find a job in that field. Like, what can I use my language skills for, right? So I did, and I ended up working at a big data corporation. And my first job was to do with data entry. So I was working with French language data, but it was data entry. So started there, got, some professional footing, and quickly realized, like, I would like to do more. I want to grow here and grow my skills and see what more I can do. So from there, I ended up transferring, like, kind of like laterally and then up in my department, and I became a French content writer, and I remained at that job for about 3 years. So I worked in data entry, then I did content writing for French language cable providers. So yeah, then I realized, this is great. I kind of am struggling a little bit. I feel like I can't see my impact in this enormous company. I feel kind of like I don't have a lot of agency. I feel like a super tiny cog in a ginormous wheel, and kind of like it doesn't really matter if I can't really see my contributions. And that was something I figured out that I wanted to do. So I started looking for jobs, and I started thinking, like, what's something that I can do that would help fulfill this need that I've learned I have. And my at the time, my boyfriend, who my long-term boyfriend, who's been with me through the all of the peaks and valleys of my adult life, who's very technologically minded, just kind of suggested, like, hey, have you considered looking into tech? You're creative, you like languages. Um, this is a really cool field, and there's tons of jobs. So I was like, I don't know, like, I had a Dell in college. I got my own laptop, but it quickly died. It got all kinds of viruses, and I kind of was, after I graduated, I didn't really use it for a few years. So I was like, well, I don't have my own laptop, and I'm clearly, like, very technologically illiterate. So I have not ever considered tech. So this kind of, like, this was a little bee in my bonnet after his suggestion. I was kind of like, the more I learned about it, the more interesting it sounded. So that's when I discovered General Assembly, GA. And they had it's like a boot camp, and they had a front end web development class. And my technologically minded partner said, he was like, I'm so interested in this. I'd love to learn how to learn more and put this to use. Like, do you want to take this class? And I said, why not? So he had an old laptop, a MacBook, that he ended up lending me so I could take this class because I didn't have my own computer. And it was my first Apple product ever, and I never looked back. But so I got his laptop. We the closest GA to us, closest General Assembly, was in New York. So I'm based in Philadelphia, and this front end web development class was in New York. So we decided, why not? It meets every Saturday for 3 months. Let's go. Let's do it. So for 3 months, every Saturday, we drove from Philly to New York to take front end web development. And it was completely new. It was a totally alien field to me, but the instructor I had was incredible, very engaging, very knowledgeable, and just a great teacher, like, so good at taking these high level concepts and explaining them to total newbies like me. And I just became very interested, and it was all the basic stuff: HTML, CSS, and eventually a little bit of JavaScript. So through that, I had I dipped my toes in tech, and I learned how to speak semi-intelligently about it. And I learned, oh my goodness, there's all these amazing things I can create, all these things I can do, and I can understand the internet so much better now. Like, this is great. So took that class. It was incredible. And once it was over, I had built, I got a little ambitious with my project. So I built like part of a bigger uh, project, a bigger website. And the project I remember was it was a website, and I integrated a Google API, and I used JavaScript to scrape site data and find all the information about the Comic Cons that were across the country. So that was my website. You could just you could see all the pins where all the cons were located, and that was my that was my project. And so at the time, that was an enormous undertaking because I had no idea what I was doing like 3 months prior. So it was very satisfying though to see like a little, I made something that looked cute, and it was actually kind of functional on demo day. So that was cool, and it definitely gave me a lot to think about. It was a total change in perspective. I was like, this is something I can do now. This is very interesting. So once that was finished, I took what I had learned and I just kind of looked over it, and I built out my project a little bit more. I never launched it though. I should probably do that at some point. But I took what I learned, and I thought, how I want to know more. I gotta get deeper involved in this. So I looked to the local tech community. And it turns out that Philly has a super active and super enthusiastic, booming tech community. And not just like with jobs, but also with meetups and classes and folks who are just like so excited to teach people and speak with like-minded people about tech. So I got involved in a lot of organizations that put on regular events and classes, especially ones that focused on women in tech and LGBTQ folks in tech. And they were just, there's always something going on. So that was another thing that just opened my eyes to the possibilities of tech and all the people that were out there, and all the jobs and opportunities, and opportunities for mentorship too. So got involved in the local community right after GA. And from there, there was this one, hold on, which one? So there was Girl Develop It, which is a national organization that focuses on getting more women and non-binary people involved in tech. And they were some of my favorite classes that were put on in the Philly chapter. So I went to a lot of those, and I met so many people that were similar to me, who were just either tech pros or brand new to tech, or just learning, just seeing what's out there. So I connected with those people in real life and on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So meeting those people was, for me, who's usually extroverted, this past year not included in that umbrella statement. So it's very important to me to meet and talk to other people who are interested in the same things. So met a bunch of the Girl Develop It folks. And from there, I learned about all kinds of other organizations and conferences. So I went to those, went to as many of those as possible, listened to plenty of folks talk about what they were doing, and just deepened my own knowledge and interest in tech and of the tech industry. So a few years pass, and I'm going to these events, meeting folks, revisiting stuff that I had worked on at GA. And I'm still at my big corporate job. And I'm learning like, try to, I'm trying to incorporate stuff that I've learned into my job, and it's not happening. So like, all right, I don't really have the confidence at this point to put myself out in the world for a new job, a new tech job. But I want to keep learning, and I want this to go somewhere eventually. So that's when I decided I'm going to take this further. I have to, or I want to learn more. Uh, I also discovered that as cool as front end is, as awesome as CSS is, I don't necessarily have the eye for design that I wish I did. I am more interested in making things work and the functionality of things. So I thought, let's see about backend and full stack. So I went online and I started looking at some classes, but I'm not really one for being self-taught, especially if it's a brand new field. Like I had some familiarity, but it was difficult to stick with it. So I thought bootcamp worked. That got these new concepts, ingrained in me, and my interest has flourished. So let's see what's out there for boot camps. So that's when I started shopping around and seeing what was out there for backend and full stack. And I found that there was this amazing program at UPenn at their Pennovation Center. So on campus, but not like slightly off campus. So it was relatively easy-ish to get to for me, despite working at the time out in the burbs. It was a bit of a drive, but just get on the highway and go down there. So it's like, this is something I can do. This is feasible. Classes are 3 times a week for 6 months, Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and then Saturday mornings. So it's like, I can make that work. I got to work during the day, then go to my boot camp at night. So I looked into it. It was definitely an investment, but it was an investment well worth making in myself. And I decided to just take the plunge. Why not? So I got into the boot camp, signed myself up, and started attending. And that was another experience where I was so fortunate to have this amazing instructor, knew exactly what he was doing and how to communicate it to folks. So I picked up things that I would have never thought possible even like 5 years ago. We focused, there was a front end component, of course, lots, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And then we got into the MERN stack. So MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. So I was just like, it was incredible. You could build something from the front to the back to the front. So cool to see everything come together. So I built a bunch of projects in my boot camp, including portfolio site. There were a bunch of games that were pretty fun to build using JavaScript and various JavaScript frameworks. And then at the end, I had a group project that was essentially like a data, kind of similar to what I work on now. It's just like a business data website. So you can just display all of your accounts and all of your inventory and everything just in graphs, and you can look at everything. And it was some major accomplishment. It was pretty cool. So built all of these projects, successfully completed boot camp. And at that point, the boot camp started in May or late April 2018, ended in October. And in November, it just so happened that the stars decided to align even more in my, pushing me towards tech. And I learned that my office was going to be closed. So everybody working there had the choice to either relocate or, part ways with a severance. So I was like, well, now or never. I guess I feel really vindicated in my decision to continue my tech journey because my current office will no longer be available. So I had some job prospects to check out, and I had some more learning to do about, just from the perspective of a job seeker now. So I spent the last couple months while my office was sort of transitioning to, getting ready to close, just pulling all my resources together and reaching out to contacts I had made in the local tech scene, and continuing communication with the people I met in my boot camp and my instructor even, and just kind of lining everything up as I could, and updating my LinkedIn, updating my portfolio site, and updating, what's the other, GitLab and GitHub. Very important to keep those updated too. So tried to get everything together before my office closed, and I did. And once it closed, which was in end of December 2018, I had all the time in the world to devote to job search. And I did. And I treated it like it was my full-time job, because it was. And I'm sure we've all heard folks say searching for a job is a full-time job, and it really is. So I got to just dedicate all of my intensity to making sure I knew what was out there, and I was talking to as many people as possible, and putting myself in front of as many companies as possible. So in my job search, I have a very good friend from college who I talk to pretty much every day. And so I'm telling her about my job search, and she says, "Hey, my company is looking for developers. Are you interested?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely interested." And that company was RollMaster. So with the help of my friend, I was able to get my resume in front of the company I'm currently working at. I spoke to my now boss and a couple coworkers, and they decided to give me a chance. Some kids straight out of boot camp, and I became a developer. It was very exciting. So once I got to work, I then had to adjust to not only a brand new field, tech, and my role day to day, but also working remotely, because I had been going to an office for 6 years. So that was an adjustment in and of itself. And I think a lot of us are familiar with that adjustment due to the last year, but it was a process for me. So it's like, how do I fit in my daily duties with learning my routine as a remote worker now? So that was a little bit of a process, and I definitely would not have ever thought that getting used to working from home would take as much time as it did. But once I got a routine, I got that routine, and I've stuck to it and been able to successfully execute all my tasks, and not get distracted too much. So working as a developer was definitely of course, very different for me. So I had to just figure out where I fit in. And RollMaster, we are a small but mighty skeleton crew of developers. We have a core software and a web development team, and I work more on the web development side. So I have 5 coworkers right now, so not many of us. Definitely immediately learned that I would no longer be a tiny cog in a huge wheel. Like, every single contribution I made mattered, and I was able to see my contributions every day and see how they were working in the grand scheme of our software, which was very cool. But I jumped around on a few different projects when I first got hired. So I started working on some front end stuff in PHP, and I used some CSS and Sass. Worked on that project for a bit, and then I worked on a project where we used a lot of JavaScript and Vue, and I had already learned the React framework, so learning Vue was pretty easy. I was happy to say. Learning languages on the job was a little nerve-wracking at first. I was like, oh, I hope I can learn this in, in a solid amount of time. But I figured out, you learn by doing, and it's great, especially when you already have a couple languages in your repertoire. So learned Vue, and learned that I definitely like Vue a lot better than React. I know that's kind of fighting words, but I'll stick to what I said. And bounced around on a couple other projects before I finally settled on in the language that I've been working in primarily for the last year or so, which is a little bit of a surprising one, Cobol. So Cobol's common business oriented language, and it's super old school. I think it was invented in the late 50s, and a lot of NASA stuff is programmed in Cobol. So it's pretty cool. But not a lot of places use it, and not a lot of jobs in the market, at least in Philly, are looking for Cobol developers. But that doesn't matter because my job needs Cobol developers. So I've just kind of found this niche. It's very functional and cool, and I've been working Cobol for about a year. And my role is essentially programming new endpoints for our API. So it's translating all of the Cobol to our RESTful API so people can get their data on whatever platform they're using. And it's been very cool to work in that kind of in between, like the super old school language just translated to modern web has been a very interesting journey, and an interesting thing to see. So that's I think that pretty much covers my journey to where I am now. Yeah, that's it. That's all she wrote.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. We can go ahead and open up the floor to Q&A, and I mean, I'm happy to get it started while people try and formulate their questions. I guess the first question I'd shoot to you, Lexi, is since you're dealing with basically translating, right now Cobol into something that I guess more people would be used to using, like JavaScript on the API and the web. Do you think that because you have such a background in knowing spoken languages, has it helped you in learning programming languages at all?
Oh, that's a great question. And absolutely, yes, it has. It has helped me learning languages. Learning French from a young age, and then I did learn Arabic in college. Like I said, I've been naturally blessed with language abilities, and that has been the easiest thing for me to translate into my STEM life, because with spoken languages, you recognize there's very clearly defined patterns, and you start recognizing those patterns. And in programming languages, it's the same thing, even if it's something old school that doesn't necessarily have all these super, that's not like super clean like a newer language like JavaScript would be. So even in Cobol, there's a bunch of patterns that I can recognize, and I would definitely attribute that to my experience learning spoken languages.
So I have a question for you, Lexi. Thank you for everything that you've done, because it sounds very interesting. You have a very interesting path forward in what you're doing. So if you could characterize for me, basically, you've done front end, you've done back end, and you're full stack. From a coding perspective, just characterize what's, I guess, what's native to front end, what's native to back end, and what's native to full stack. The fact that you've done some Cobol programming is great, because I'll let you see, I'm old school, right? So I did some Cobol many moons ago, long before you were here. So it's interesting. Sounds like it sounds like a sort of a conversion program. You're converting some Cobol to APIs and that kind of thing, which is really great, and bringing in React. So if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about full stack versus back end and front end. And when you do that, when you're dealing with, I know it's coding for the most part, but in terms of dealing with various servers, hardware, software, and networking, that kind of thing, just give us a little feel for how that works for you. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I think if I'm understanding the question, it's just kind of what parsing languages from what's front end, what's full stack, what's back end, right?
Exactly.
Cool. So front end, I think is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and its myriad frameworks, Vue, React, all of that stuff, and all of the new ones that I don't know yet. And then back end, so front end is those languages, and it's more client side. It's what folks can see and interact with. And back end is more like Node, which is also JavaScript, but server oriented. Node and database like Mongo database and SQL databases, and all this stuff, the functional things that are working behind the scenes that customers or clients are interacting with, but they can't tell they're interacting with them, and that are interacting with the internet at large. So full stack is kind of technically like a marriage of those things. Like you're maybe working on some more functional stuff in Node or Express, like spinning up those servers and programming your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to interact with those servers. So for me, I haven't worked with Node in a while, since my boot camp. But for me, the Cobols, the back end, all the functional stuff that's off the grid. And so that's the back end portion of my job. And the front end is interacting with our RESTful API, which is in PHP. And I build the endpoints in the API, and I set up pathways in the API, and I make the functions, well, the routines in Cobol, and that's passed into the API and translated onto our web-based part of the software.
And knowing what you know now, you've actually done all three. But if you were going to do it again, you did the full stack bootcamp and that kind of thing. Do you think that there was an advantage to doing like front end first and then back end and then getting into full stack, or would you have attacked it and just gone into full stack?
For me personally, and my complete lack of knowledge of, well, anything, I'd say that I definitely would do it again the same way, going into easing myself into front end, which it's not really easing, but it's easier because you can see what you're doing straight away in the browser, and just like you're able to connect more. I was able to connect more with that right away and connect with those concepts that I could see more there. So I would have definitely, that's something in life that if I got a second chance, I would definitely repeat it that way, because then it was much easier to get into full stack and back end once I had kind of a grasp on that.
So you said you were on basically year 2 of your job, right? So what do you know right now at year 2 that you wish you had known, day 1, either at your job or even day 1 of the whole experience that you're going through?
Maybe this seems obvious, but I think I wish I had known that it's just okay to not know everything, and to ask for and accept help when needed. And I also think if if you can work closely with somebody on the job, you should absolutely do it. And that sharing of skills, you'll end up, even as a newbie, you can end up teaching those people something, and then those folks will definitely impart their wisdom to you. So definitely speak up and ask for help, because chances are good that somebody is willing to and excited to teach you or help you work something out. And even though we're all in binary talking to the computer, it's human interaction that makes things stick and makes everything work.
On that train, do you think that, because you came from a big data company and then now you're on a skeleton crew, do you think being in a very, like, there's only 5 other people with you, helped enable you to be able to ask questions more because you kind of had to? Or do you find that was more inviting, that kind of environment?
Definitely. And don't get me wrong, there were plenty of people that were helpful at my other job, but it was a completely different situation, of course. But being on a smaller team is inherently just more collaborative, because we're all working on the same thing. So you have to talk to each other to avoid stepping on toes. And in that talking to one another, it's definitely much more natural to get questions and just have a conversation about what you're working on and anything that you might be stuck on.
Hi, sorry, I apologize. It is thundering where I'm at. You might hear some noise in the background. But Lexi, thanks so much for sharing your journey. And one of the things that I think about your journey that probably would resonate with a lot of our students is making that career change and not, coming from a tech background to start with. And you did touch upon this a little bit, but I guess my sort of general question is, how do you become a techie? Like there's always sort of this idea of, oh, this is what a techie looks like, or this is how a techie acts. And when that's not your sort of background or the culture that you're a part of, and you're making that career switch, like, are there some tips that you have about how you can become more a part of that culture if that's not the culture you're a part of now?
Sure. Honestly, and forgive this cliche beginning to my answer, but anyone can be a techie. Techies look like everybody. And to give you a real answer, it's like something that really helped me kind of fit in and learn where I fit in the community, and feel like I belonged there, was going to so many local events and meeting so many different people, like from all walks of life. And it was especially helpful for me to go to women in tech events and see the just tons and tons of women that were people that looked like me and didn't look like me, and all kinds, just everyone from all walks of life was just there, and they had so many different experiences to share, and they were all working in different, all like full stack, back end, front end, like just really, it ran the gamut. And it was so important to me to see those people and talk to them and help just, A, integrate myself in the community, and B, see that yes, there's all kinds of people in the tech community and I totally belong here.
So it sounds like you just got to get out there and meet people.
Yeah, and of course right now that's not necessarily the most amazing thing to hear, but another thing actually that I meant to touch on is and that's very easy to do now in the virtual world, is get involved in open source projects on GitHub. There's like a bunch of projects out there that are just like folks are actively developing, and they have all of their issues. If you're familiar with GitHub, they have the explanation of what these projects are. Here's the code base. It's available for you to fork. You can pull it down onto your laptop and check it out. And here's all the issues we're having. And it's open to anybody to contribute to those projects. So in these times of not really having a lot of in-person events, checking out what's available on GitHub from the open source project sphere is something you can do too, to feel like, you can see the contributions you've made to that project, and of course end up speaking with people who are actively developing those projects too.
So Lexi, does your company write software to sell, or do they do software, or are you guys contracted to helping folks out or helping companies out?
We sell our software to
Okay.
flooring companies.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you're actually writing software packages and that kind of thing, and you create web presences for these companies, or how does that work?
So we have the companies end up creating their own web presences because our software is scalable and accessible, and they can customize and pick and choose features that they'd like to use or not use. So they end up using our software to create their own software. It's less, our software is less like, here's our company website, we're using RollMaster, and like, to make this website, here it is. It's more internal use, but they can absolutely customize, pick and choose the features they want to use for their company. And depending on the size and nature of their business, that affects it too.
You mentioned you were part of like a 5-person team.
Yes.
Okay, so when you all are doing your coding and whatnot, I'm assuming that there's some pre-planning. What do you all do to lay out exactly who's going to be writing what in terms of getting the thing accomplished?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on my side, so there's 2 development teams, and so my side's the web development side, and there's 5 of us there, and then there's a few other folks on the core side, and we do all work together. But since my company has been around for a while, RollMaster was started in the late 70s actually. It's all the issues and everything they want to work on has not only expanded due to new technology and new internet, but has also kind of like trickled down. It's an enormous code base, and there's plenty of stuff to do. So we kind of assess what customers need and what they want, and tackle that first. And then there's some stuff that's put on the back burner that sort of is like constantly running through, like there's a bunch of issues we can all slowly like fix, like in between more high priority, like customer focused issues. Yeah, so if some folks want some new endpoints or have new files they want put into our software, that definitely takes precedence over refactoring or rewriting old kind of clunkier code.
Chelsea asks, other than HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, what other languages do you recommend a student learn to become a web developer?
That's a good question. Those were definitely the main 3 for me. That's where I started. I think I'm honestly gonna boldly say that JavaScript has got to be one of, if not the most important, one of the most important languages to learn. And if you can master or get as close to mastering that as possible, you'll be able to learn all of its frameworks like Vue and React and all that stuff is JavaScript, but it's just different than vanilla JavaScript. So I would honestly say JavaScript is the most important, but if you want to get into more backend stuff, I would definitely recommend checking out Express and Node, which are important for spinning up servers and creating backend and full stack projects. And Node is just also another form of JavaScript. So I'd say learn as much JavaScript and as many learn as much JavaScript as you can, and the frameworks are ever evolving. So it can be overwhelming. So don't worry about knowing every single framework or anything, but the more comprehension you have of JavaScript, I think the more doors will open for the ever evolving new tech coming out.
Just about your interviewing process for your job. Was your interview a more traditional, the normal type interview that most people are accustomed to, or was it more of a coding based interview?
So my interview with my current job was definitely one of the least typical interviews I've ever had. It was very unique. I met virtually with my now boss and another coworker, and they pretty much gave me the rundown of the company and the software and the stack. And I was sitting there like, oh my goodness, this is, wow, this is like a whole technological extravaganza. And then I talked a little bit about myself, but it was more of an exchange of information rather than a coding based interview. And it was definitely not a whiteboard interview, which I know are pretty common. And I've had a couple of those that have gone very well and a couple that have definitely not. So the interviewing process for this job was, I guess, atypical for a coding job, but typical for regular job. It was much more of an exchange rather than a show us what you can do right now.
Old school Cobol. When we actually did Cobol back in the day, we used to compile and link the code, right? Which is probably a lot different than what you do now in terms of Cobol.
Nope.
Same thing. Same old compiling.
Oh yeah, yep, there's a compiler. And so we compile it, and then to test it, move it up to our testing servers. So but yeah, it's essentially dropping our compiled Cobol into the server, so I can test it through Postman or occasionally through the browser. But that requires a couple other things if I want to see what I've done in the browser. It's not just like in VS Code, if you're using JavaScript or Node or anything, you can't. There's that nice little open in browser.
Yes.
Definitely not the case. There have not been that many incredible advances for Cobol.
Well, one advance I can tell you is that when I did it back in the day, right, we actually had a card deck, so there were no PCs or anything like that. So that would have made it a little more interesting for you.
Wow.
All right, I got two more questions from the chat.
Sure.
One is, how did you find local events? Which I'm going to tack on that because we've had many people say, go to Meetup, meet people, talk to people, go out there. So how did you find local events? And then what does that look like now in COVID? And the second question is, do you have any recommendations for full stack online boot camps?
Good questions. So to address the first part of that, how do you find meetups? I literally went to meetup.com and just was like, tech, internet. And what came up, I just kind of filtered through that. And once I found a couple interesting looking or promising looking groups, I researched, I looked online, I was like, what's the deal? Is this going to be just like a bunch of people like sitting around not knowing what's what, or like is there going to be is this an established event or not, which was important to me at the time because I just wanted to get a sense of what was out there. So I would say, I mean, Meetup was a great resource for me. And once I kind of overcame initial shyness of being new at an event, I talked to people, and once I got to know them, they'd be like, "Oh, hey, there's this conference I'm a part of," or "Hey, my friend is teaching this class," or "There's this other meetup. Do you want to come with me?" And just talking to them. And so nowadays, of course, there's less real life meetups, but there's still meetups and classes happening online. There's a couple local to me coding events that like they'll have hackathons, or they'll offer a free intro to something class. Like I just took last week or 2 weeks ago, I took a free intro to Python class, which was super, super cool. Python is another language I would definitely suggest learning because it's very, it's fairly accessible. It's not easy, but it's accessible. But not to go on a tangent, but there's there's definitely stuff online. Like if you look up maybe some organizations nationally, like Girl Develop It is a reason. I know I mentioned them already, but they have some meetups and some free classes occasionally. Yeah, check out Meetup and see what's local, and you might be surprised to find that some things are just local chapters of national organizations that have all kinds of resources, including virtual meetups.
Is there any recommendation for full stack online boot camps, or even like you said, Python, because it came to mind, some Python stuff?
So a very great resource I have found now that I feel more comfortable learning learning new technological stuff on my own has been Udemy, udemy.com. They have very reasonably priced classes, and many of which are just taught by these fantastic instructors. There is a full stack web boot camp that I bought on Udemy while I was in my full stack boot camp to just kind of, really just bombard myself with these concepts and have a couple different folks' perspectives, teaching as I was being taught by a couple different people. Claude, I can get you the name of that class. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that's a great one. And then there's a free, oh my goodness, let me remember his name. There's a guy with a YouTube channel. Oh, the Net Ninja. He has a YouTube channel and he's very eloquent and a good teacher. And he covers, it's less like a full stack boot camp, but more like a compilation of resources on all kinds of languages. And it's totally free on YouTube. So the Net Ninja is really cool. And there's another developer named Wes Boss, who's very, renowned on the interwebs, and he has some really good classes in languages, just ranging the stack. But in terms of an actual boot camp, I'm thinking of a 2-part series available on Udemy that's very in depth and very reasonably priced. But I'll have to get the name to you. And also UPenn does offer virtual boot camps now, which is definitely worth checking out. And I do believe General Assembly has them too, and since before, COVID too. So just worth checking out.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then I know Tracy, you wanted to jump in and say something about meetups.
Yeah, so I had 2 comments. So I totally wanted to just endorse or back up what Lexi said about meetups. I had an experience where I was in San Francisco pre-COVID for a conference, and while I was at the conference, someone just sort of posted, "Hey, we're having this meetup." Now, I am a pretty introverted person. Y'all may not know that about me, but I am. And so the idea of just like being in a new city and going to hang out with strangers is very intimidating for me. But for whatever reason, I didn't do my normal thing and I went. And it was really a great experience and interesting because, you know, as Lexi said, there were all sorts of different types of people there. Everybody's sort of interested in the same thing though. And it was cool to like meet those folks. And so it definitely got me onto the idea of meetups and a challenge that I would say that you could present for yourself. Again, this was COVID times, and I know we're not able to kind of be out in the world like we used to. But what it made me realize is like if I go to a new place or a new city and I have some time, it might be interesting to look up a meetup because that helps you to kind of expand your network and meet new people. And so like that was kind of the experience that I had there, like in San Francisco, just meeting like-minded people, like on a, you know, in a whole different area of the country. So that's one thing. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention that for those of you who are on here that are Delgado students, you get a lot of advantages when you're a student for things like conferences. So pre-COVID, when we could physically go to conferences, many conferences would have a greatly reduced fee for students, or they would even allow you to volunteer. So you might volunteer like at the door, check in credentials for like half a day, and then giving like half a day worth of time would give you like the other half for free of the conference. So while I know that many of those conferences are now virtual, what you may want to do is just sort of look up different conferences that exist. And the great thing about virtual is now you can attend a lot of conferences that maybe you would not have before. But as a student, check to see on the back end if they waive like the conference free for you to attend, because even in the virtual space, a lot of those like trade and common conference organizations will still give students considerable discounts. And that's another way that as a student, you can network and meet people and sort of get into those areas that you may not be familiar with already. So that's just my 2 cents.
I know we're at time. So I guess I was gonna say, unless there's any last minute, like super fast questions.
I actually have one final thing that could be a resource for people. There's a great developer blog called it's dev.to. Here, I'll put it in the chat. It's open to everybody, and there's a zillion folks writing for it and offering their perspectives on anything from just like, hey, this is my experience learning how to, you know, make SVGs, like SVG graphics, and like, oh, hey, I learned CSS and this is what happened, to like, I am a professional hardcore developer, like here's a bunch of tips, and even to stuff like, here's some really cool projects for people of, you know, beginner levels or intermediate levels, whatever you want. That here's something here you can build. Here's how I built it. Follow along. There's a lot of stuff out there that's just the internet is like inherently your best friend as a developer, because everybody, you know, that's what we're all here for. So there's so much stuff out there that's free, and also of course great paid content, but there's just a lot of resources out there. So just Google like crazy and hear from people who have similar and different experiences from you, and you'll feel like you'll find your way to slot into the community and the tech world easily.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lexi, for sharing that and for sharing your whole story and experience with us. And I want to thank everyone who's in here for attending. I also want to say, feel free to reach out to the department at CMIN, that's CMIN at dcc.edu, and let us know what you think about these guest events, or, you know, if there's something you want to see in the future. And as always, thank you for being here. And thank you again, Lexi, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everyone for attending. I really Really appreciate all of you and wish you the best of luck in your professional and academic pursuits. Tech is awesome.